from that all-important hearing that is currently underway in the Supreme Court. Remember, 14 parties from the opposition had approached the apex court with a plea which suggested that central investigation agencies like the CBI and ED are being misused by the centre in order to target the opposition parties. And now, in some very, very scathing observations, the Supreme Court has questioned the arguments that were being presented by the lawyer for the opposition parties, saying that we are being targeted, the conviction rate is very low, to which the CGI said, how can you seek preferential rules for a certain group of people, which in this case happened to be politicians. For more on the arguments and the highlights of the case in court, I'm now joined by Nikunj. It's over to you, sir.
Well, Priya, the fact is that this is a very important petition that the opposition parties have filed in the top court. At this point in time, this is at the stage of observation when the Chief Justice of India probably is trying to decipher all the issues and then finally arrive at some kind of conclusion. However, the preliminary observations of the Chief Justice are extremely critical. He is trying to ascertain that whether the politicians or people who are politically exposed or people who are members of a particular political party can be put on a different pedestal than the ordinary or common citizen. To the answer to which, in his own words, the Chief Justice has given that, look here, there is a common test. The test is a triple test for the fitness of arrest of a person. In the law enforcement, arrest, of course, is a very crucial and critical step through which you are curtailing the liberty of an individual, a very draconian step under the scheme of a libertarian constitution. However, enforcement agencies are empowered with that provision whenever required. To satisfy the conscience of the Constitution, the Supreme Court has put, and various appellate courts have put, a triple test of application for arrest. Now, the Supreme Court is saying that that triple test that is required ordinarily for arrest of any individual, will it apply to politicians or not? The answer is yes, and therefore the politicians or politically exposed persons or members of a political party cannot be put on a different pedestal compared to an ordinary citizen. So if by an action the liberty of an individual is being curtailed, it has to satisfy only one criteria, and that is the triple test set up by the Supreme Court of India.
Right, and in fact, some very, very scathing observations also coming in more in addition to what the court has said already. It's saying that the current plea looks like a plea to save the politicians. So it doesn't look like the things are heading in favor of the opposition parties there in the Supreme Court.
Well, it's difficult for me to say at this point in time which way the cat jumps. Difficult always to second-guess a court of law. However, these are questions that are being raised by the top court's top bench at this point in time. And these are fairly valid questions. The lawyers of the plaintiffs, in this case the 14 opposition parties, who have moved Supreme Court citing the misuse of official agencies by the government of India, led by Prime Minister Narendra Modi, will have to necessarily satisfy the court, will have to necessarily answer all these questions. And to my mind, if I see them as somebody who has covered the enforcement agency and administration for well over 2 decades now, these are bona fide questions. They will have to be raised and answered by the lawyers of the plaintiff, in this case the defendants also.
Right. One of the arguments that has also been put out by the advocate representing the opposition parties here, Abhishek Manu Singhvi, is that 45.19% of votes cast in the last state UT Assembly elections and 42.5% of the votes cast in the 2019 general elections belong to the group of parties that are now in the court with their petition demanding certain exemptions, to which the court is now saying that once you demand exceptions, the plea in itself becomes complicated because you cannot be given superior immunity to the other citizens of the country. And the moment you say politicians, the moment you mention democracy, you talk about politicians. But coming to other points that have been made earlier as well, Nikunj, about conviction rate of the ED and how ever since the Modi government came to power, there has been an increase in number of cases that have involved politicians, especially belonging to the opposition parties. Tell us how the court has also heard rebuttals to that submitted by the ED.
Be that as it may, the cases may have risen. The percentage cited is that under the UPA 1 and 2, the percentage of cases against opposition leaders was somewhere around 56, and now it has gone up to 94.
Okay. I'm sorry, Nikunj, I'll have to interrupt you because we're getting breaking developments that the court has said that we will not entertain this plea. Harish, it's over to you for the latest.
Yes, still oral observations, Priya. Now the order still not out. Still the exchange between the lawyers Abhishek Mani Singhvi, who's appearing for the 14 parties, and the Chief Justice led bench is on. As of now, the oral remark has come. The big oral remarks that we cannot entertain this petition. This is not one or two individuals. Before us, the aggrieved individuals before us. This is essentially a plea to save politicians, is what the Supreme Court bench has said. It has indicated that it will not entertain this plea filed by 14 opposition parties against the misuse of CBI and ED, and has questioned how can politicians enjoy greater immunity, number one. Number two, politicians stand on same footing as citizens, number two. Three, how can politicians only be arrested after following the triple test? Remember, Priya, the triple test means that they wanted that politicians can only be arrested after once it is confirmed that there is no flight risk, and they will not tamper with evidence, they will not influence witnesses. And the Chief Justice also asked, how can there be a different procedure for politicians? Chief Justice's big observations are like, conviction is already low in our country. This is not 3 or 4 aggrieved persons coming to Supreme Court, but the opposition parties as a whole. Can we set aside prosecutions merely on this basis? You give us some statistics. Can we say because of these statistics there should be no investigation or no prosecution? Can there be immunity? Ultimately, a political leader is basically a citizen. As citizens, we are all amenable to the same law. Chief Justice goes on to say, how can we say political leaders cannot be arrested without triple test? How can you enjoy greater immunity as politicians? How can you claim more immunity? Very big observations coming in from the Supreme Court. Chief Justice also going on to say political leaders stand absolutely on the same standing as citizens of the country. They don't claim higher identity. How can there be a different set of procedure for them? So, Priya, still the hearing is on, and we are waiting for the final order from the Supreme Court. Back to you.
Right. Nikunj, once the verdict is out, and if it is on the same lines as the oral remarks that have been made, it is definitely going to be a major political flashpoint with the BJP citing validation. In fact, stay on with me because Rashid Alvi of the Congress is now joining us. So, your first reaction to the Supreme Court saying that political parties from the opposition cannot demand exemptions from the law because it is same for every citizen in the country irrespective of their standing in the society. Mr. Alvi?
Hello?
Yes, sir. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear.
Yes, sir. I was asking for your first reaction to the observations that have been made by the CGI in the Supreme Court during the hearing on the plea that has been filed by opposition parties saying that CBI and ED is being misused, to which the court says that you cannot seek certain exemptions like no arrest for politicians without a triple test just because you are a politician.
You know, we have never said that politicians should not be arrested. There should be different law for politicians. But unnecessarily, if law is being misused, that is the objection which we and all opposition parties are making. Supreme Court, whatever Supreme Court decides, we respect for Supreme Court. But at the same time, it is our considered opinion that all agencies are working under the pressure of Prime Minister and his government. He was praising a few days back CBI. Entire country is with CBI. Can you justify it? Whether CBI is contesting election in this country, entire country is with you. How can you say like this? How can you praise like this CBI? Inside Parliament you are saying Enforcement Directorate has brought all opposition leaders together. What is this? So that is the reason we say that all agencies are working under the pressure of this government. You know, during 10 years of UPA's regime, only 112, as I remember, raids had been taken place by ED during 10 years.
Okay.
And in last 8 years, more than 20,000 raids have been taking place.
Right. Some of those arguments have
this?
been refuted in the court as per the submissions made by the ED as well. But we'll get into that later because Amit Malviya of the BJP is also joining us on the broadcast. So your first reaction to both what the Supreme Court is saying, the CJI is saying, and what Rashid Alvi's counter is?
Well, let the country see that the issue of corruption has brought the entire opposition together. It was under the UPA regime that the CBI was called a caged parrot.
Mr. Malviya, I'll just take 10 seconds